Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I'll take a short reading this morning this is from the first book of the Samyutta Nikaya. A couple of readings. 123. A tangle inside, a tangle outside. This generation is entangled in a tangle. I ask you this, O Gautama, who can disentangle this tangle? So what I should have said was this whole book is about devatas, celestial spirits, asking questions of the Buddha or meeting some of the Buddha's disciples. So this is the devata is asking the Buddha this question. When you ask a Buddha a question, you're liable to get an answer. May not be what you think. One established on virtue, wise, developing the mind and wisdom. A bhikkhu ardent and discreet, he can disentangle this tangle. Those for whom passion and hatred, along with ignorance, have been expunged, the arahants with asava destroyed, for them the tangle is disentangled. Where name and form ceases, stops without remainder, and also impingement and perception of form, it is here this tangle is cut. So just bear with that for a while. And here's another one. David asked another question. For where do the streams turn back? Where does the round no longer revolve? Where does name and form cease, stop without remainder? Where water, earth, fire and air do not gain a footing, it is from here that the streams turn back. Here that the round no longer revolves. Here name and form ceases, stops without remainder. So I think we can all relate to the tangle. It starts off something, even David doesn't experience this kind of knotted, tangled conundrum of mind, of heart. It's memories and perceptions and feelings and responses and intentions and wishes and aversions and confusions and alarm and excitement. It all gets very tight in there. And the average person keeps trying to find, sort of solidify it, to get the right strand, if you like, and they're trying to make it more solid, become something, assemble a unity out of this tangled strands of perceptions and feelings, intentions, actions, wishes, ideas, moods, internal emotions, bodily states. How can I get it right? And in this, trying to make this right, this is becoming. Bhava, solidify, and the direction of Dhamma is kind of the other way. So it's quite a useful image. When you think of a tangle, you don't make a tangle untangled by holding it tight, or by adding further complexities to it. So the image is useful. We can relate to that. How do you get out of the tangle? You have to loosen it. Take a thread that's loose and begin to open that up. And gradually it will unfold. As is direct practice, we directly experience where is the piece I can get in on, where it's accessible to us, that light touch. Getting frantic, getting pressurized is not going to do it. How do you find the right piece that you can just get onto and touch, and how's that? How's that? So that blur jump, open, and then just wait. There's where it undoes. There's where the assumptions and reactions can leap or can not leap. The gap. And that's where the tangle begins to loosen up. So this may be around, one's sense of oneself, getting upset about it or worrying about it. Just a minute, just who's this? Is that pausing, going the other way, rather than getting more intense? Just, who's this? Where do you place intention? Because most people can't stay in that open state. So, Buddha's saying someone established in virtue, you think, well, there's the liking and disliking, the worrying about the future, what you are and what you're not. Just place your mind on virtue. Gives you a line. Just abide with that. The other stuff will shake itself out. So we have to have, in practice, we have to have these lines or these themes that we can get the mind or the heart to sense, hold steady, let the tangle begins to unravel. Yeah. So you hold on to virtue to loosen up regret, worry, compulsive actions. Do this, act this way. So it gives you something that's unentangled. We're established on discernment, wisdom. Ability just to. This is the line. And developing the citta, heart and discernment. So, developing the citta, steadying in the body, clearing the hindrances, steadying, soothing, calming the reactivity, brightening, clearing the sluggishness. So these effects, the effective experience is developed in a positive way. Brighter. And discernment, because the mind, the citta is then much more open, and you can discern, this is where the compulsion happens, the reaction happens, the stuckness happens, the comes rushing in there, that's the place. You bring your clear attention onto those places, open, calm, it releases. And using the embodied reference, on the steadiness that the body, embodiedness gives you. Feel this emotional jump and then breathing out. Oh yeah, that ripple can die down, can move through. So this is not an emotional reaction to the ripple, it's not an ideological statement or suppression or dislike of a ripple. It's just noticing if you stay steady and centered, the nature of ripples is to rise up and pass. That's how it goes. Even pleasant ones. So when you're cultivating citta, you cultivate first of all to get past the unpleasant, and then to get past the pleasant. Get past means doesn't mean you don't feel the pleasure, but the pleasure doesn't get you excited. As the Buddha remarked the other day, when your mind is collected in the sense of refreshment, piti, rapture, and ease moves through, it's rather like the ball of suds. The bath attendant collects this bath powder, but it doesn't ooze, it doesn't burst out, where a lot of the time one does ooze a little bit, excited. And that too passes, levels out. So you're developing that long-term discernment to see what things do. This is what they do. And if you're not jumping onto the next thing, you witness the process as it goes through its shimmering and tangling and excitement or whatever, and then stay with it. So with pleasant, if that's held carefully, it tends towards sukha, ease, so just relief, a much steadier state, and that inclines towards equanimity. If equanimity is lingered in, sensed for its open sensitivity, its ability to encompass all feeling, not to reject feeling, to encompass all of it, to allow all of it to pass, arise and pass. This is a pretty unrestricted heart. Let's carry it all. And equanimity is, it's right there in the top of the list of these lists here, enlightenment factors, number 7, paramita number 10, jhana number 4, it's right out there. And but most of us refer, I don't know how you refer to equanimity or what the word means, but I think certainly a few years ago, even though I kind of liked the idea, it sounded good, but in terms of an actual experience in the heart, very little. Yeah. I think nearest equanimity was something like boredom, or resignation, or about to get depressed. Because the heart had gone further. It's just got this place where not feeling positive, it just felt, oh well, sort of shrug. Means about to get depressed, or mildly depressed, or bored, or indifferent. And this is not very lofty, is it? Because the heart hadn't really deepened to the point where the reality of what this term is referring to can be directly experienced. So it does take this deepening process. That's why it is, considered the consummation in terms of that which can be measured. Enlightenment factors, it's the consequence of sati. You've got any equanimity, do you have any sati, mindfulness, ability to bear something in mind, stay steady with it, both ward off hindrances and also dwell, linger in the qualities of what's good. Can you explore, investigate, what's this about? How does this feel? And do this, your energy becomes more balanced and steady, It's not held back, it's not surging forward, it's inclining and exploring carefully. The result of that is that's carried through as a refreshment. The somatic domain becomes bright because you've discerned this is how that fits, that sits there, and that's just untangled. Don't do that. And you can practice with this in your own body. And the resonance is that emotions live and responses leave in your body. If you're tensed up, or you feel oppressed, or you feel jittery, feeling the whole thing, breathing through it, evens out, you get a sense of refreshment and ease. This is quite pivotal, right in the centre of those enlightenment factors, because this is what is the fulfillment on that affective level, being affected, ease, passaddhi, tranquility, ease. And then, as it said, when the body is tranquil, at ease, the mind is happy, sukha, it is concentrated, it's consolidated, it's no longer broken up into excitement and depression or elation and sadness, just settled. And then this is where, the mind can deepen to its roots. Citta deepens to its roots. And what we don't know, at least without practice, is that the roots of citta are open and still. It's open, unobstructed, still. Not still held still, not held still, they are still. And the average person doesn't get there or isn't able to go there because there's so much tangle that stops that descent into the stillness, where it's just open, it's not dismissing anything, it's not shrugging things off, it's just open. And the tonality of that, if we look at it in tonal terms, is even tone, equanimous. It's not indifferent, it's not dismissive. You look in the life of the Buddha, someone who perfected all this, he's still out there doing a huge amount of stuff, walking around, teaching, encouraging, adjudicating, listening, responding, all day, half the night, most of the night, lying on his deathbed, asking, doing a Q&A on his deathbed. The person's not indifferent. Yet, so when the heart turns outward, it's compassionate. When it turns back on itself, it's equanimous. And that equanimity means it's no pressure to become, or just let things be expressed that are true. This is the full development of citta and wisdom. One can disentangle the tangle of one's contradictory emotions and logic. Think one thing, but the heart goes another way. And you feel you should do this, but actually you feel like that. You like to be this, but really what's happening is that. It's kind of, and you're living in a world which is full of that tangled state, contradiction. So this is how that experience, your direct experience, can come out of that. Outwardly, it's compassionate, inwardly equanimous, with discernment as to what is the appropriate response. Straight. When name and form ceases, stops without remainder, also impingement and perception of form, it's here the tangle is cut. And so to add to that, where the name and form cease, the streams, this means the streams of worldly or conditioned influences streaming in, where does all this, where they turn back, they don't get in there. What is that place they don't enter into? Where does name and form cease? Where water, earth, fire, and air do not gain a footing. Here name and form ceases, stops without remainder. So, the Buddha, another one of these things, he says, name covers everything. The world is tangled up in name. So name here, you might call it interpretation or something like that. Dhamma. It's the whole affective sense, or how we're affected and what that effect is about. So I was saying the other day, effect, you've got the perception, it means something, sense something, feeling, pleasure, pain, reaction, contact, impression, something lights up, volitional response, intention. Those are the factors called name. It's that cluster of aggregates. That's what name refers to, the affective sense. Form, called the four great elements: earth, water, fire and air. And this refers to these, you can use it to refer to quite a lot of things actually. Like it depends which domain you're exploring. Obviously you can see there's such things as firmness, earthiness, fire in the sun, water, rain, lakes, air. You can look at it like that, and that's quite a good way to look at it. And then you don't get so caught up in shapes and so forth. That's the earth. But here we're talking about internal domain, the somatic domain, the experience of rigidity or firmness. You feel in your body, you can sense that. You can meditate on these. The fires, the heating or coldness, heated up, fired up, cold, hot, warm, everything of that nature. Water, cohesive element, everything resonates with everything else, rather like the surface of a lake. Air, the movement, things tend to push and move. So you can see that in the wind, blows the leaves around, the breath in the body pushes internally. And the Buddha also mentions air passing through the limbs, so this is to deal with the somatic shifts of energy around the body. Now, if you meditate on those, contemplate those, and the aim is to, first of all, check the imbalance. So when we get too rigid, hard, tight, need to contemplate cohesive, fluid, flowing water. Get too fired up, cool down, and find some earth, get stabilized. Feel completely so watery, you don't know which way's up. You feel it's kind of soggy and swamped. Get some earth, get firmed up. And so you can contemplate this in your body, and the aim is to provide a sense of hard areas need to be contacted to open areas to places where there's flow. Loss of fire, his energy is too sluggish and cold. So you need to warm that up with walking or inquiry, so something there is stimulating or gladdening. Warm up the heart with metta, with inspiration that lifts it, warms it. Gets too cold, you warm it up with recollections of gratitude and Buddha and so on, heart-warming impressions. If it's too hot, too excited, cool it down, reflect on death, separation and so forth. So you just adjust these elements. You can adjust them emotionally. You can also adjust them somatically if you really have a lot of finesse in that area. Now this is elements, and when we experience impact, depending on the proclivity of the individual, they tend to get, one of these elements jumps to the fore, they get heated up, or go cold, or frozen. You see this happens to people. The shock, they just freeze, or get fiery. Fire element comes to the fore. Or they go rigid, hard, locked, dogmatic. The earth element comes to the fore. Or you get watery, just fluid, weep a lot, feel overwhelmed like that. Don't know, just feel completely disoriented, all in a swamp. Or we get restless, airy, just start fidgeting around, to this, to that, to this, to that, to this, to that, to this, to that. So these elements come to the fore. And when one comes to the fore, it's generally going out of balance. So you can contemplate some of this when emotion happens, and you register it on a somatic level, you get, which way does it go? Whichever way it goes, if it locks there, suffering is going to occur. It's going to keep going. Unfortunately, the way that the heart, unawakened heart is, it takes refuge in these elements. Well, let's put it strongly, but it inclines towards these. So the person gets fired up. Their anger will solve the problem. Being straightforward and feisty will clear the obstacles. And this happens, you see it in political debate, people get really riled up and start slamming each other to prove who's right. Get fire flashing around. And sooner or later, it leads to wounding words or even blows. Fire element. People go rigid, dogmatic and hard. Or just restlessly running around to this, to the panic. Scatter, scatter, scatter. And or just dissolve, collapse into a hopeless, soggy mess. And it's kind of, as I say, like this, it sounds funny, but it's not that funny really, because people experience tremendous suffering in those and get locked into it. Because the citta goes to these elements when it's lost. It's lost itself. It's not in its essence. It's knocked off its perch. So it goes to one of these instinctively. It's not a decision. It just happens. This is shift from perception, feeling, to this kind of reflex intention, cetana. But one aspect of nama, naming, is helps with that. In naming called attention. So it's another aspect of name, attention. Means we can, normally attention gets mesmerized by these impressions. So really in our fire and adding more to it, indignation. Bring back the story again, repeat it again, get more indignant. How dare they shouldn't have, but it really should be this way. Get more indignant, keep throwing more fuel on the fire. But one with wise attention says, no, turn. Turn the attention. You can turn it. Turn it to the away from the fire. So you could turn to just the feeling the soles of your feet, for example, earth. Turn it to the space around your body. Turn it to something where the fire isn't burning. Or I'll add more of it. Turn it towards the sense of this too will pass. So you can use mental perceptions. But even just that immediate flick, once you feel the heat, just not to blame or accuse, just wait a minute, this is not going to bring around the results that it seeks. Just let's redress the balance. Need to get some earth here. And that's probably the first skill has to be developed in the citta. And even then with things that are extremely agreeable, pleasant, enjoyable, having fun. Wait a minute, getting a little bit rocky, starts off fun, gets humorous, gets playful, and oops, what did I just say? It's just before it gets too, let's just ground that and live it out. If you're getting a bit rigid about something, it's got to be this way, it should be that way. Just wait a minute, this will pass. Let's just be more harmonious. I want it this way, but harmony is more important than rigidity. Okay, the relief when you come out of this engagement. Then you find the citta is able to return to a much wiser, more mature perspective, but also it begins to regain its own centre rather than being onto that. You get skillful at that, and it certainly takes a long while. Well, it's a long while, but in earthly terms, in years, I would suggest. It's just that immediate sense of stepping back, rather than turning to another thing. You don't turn to another thing, you just turn back to the citta. The knowing. So it's a kind of like, instead of counteracting by returning to another sign that balances it, you realise it's actually the turning itself, being able to direct the citta away from the fire into itself. Knowing, equanimous, open. This is where these elements they cease, they don't get hold. The round breaks up. The reiterations, the additions, the counteractions, the arguments, the regrets, the if only I had, they should have done it this way, all that ceases in that return to citta. So this is where these impact impressions don't reach. And that's not a decision, it's just a fact. It's a fact, and yet in real experience, for many people it's not a fact, because the citta hasn't been developed to find that, to settle in. It's always been moving around from response to reaction, from feeling uplifted to feeling depressed, to feeling excited, to feeling saddened, to feeling encouraged, to feeling rejected. It's always been so used to counteracting. Oh well, cheer up. Never mind, have one of these. Oh well, so what? That's just her opinion. You know, we've all been doing that, kind of counteracting stuff. The citta's learned to do that, to compensate, to counteract, to shift. That it's never actually found its own deep stillness, which comes through development, through exploration, Dhamma Vijaya. And the deepening process. The deepening process occurs through ease, because when ease, the citta does, its fibres separate. Sort of like you massage it until the very bound up fibres of the heart start to open up. Oh yeah. Beyond that, beyond the affective level, there's another domain that the average person doesn't access. So it always sounds like, you know, you cut off the feeling, you reject it, but it's not rejection, it's just a place where it stops by itself. That's the point of it. It's not where you want it to stop, it just does. Now if we, practice like that, this is kind of what happens. And personally, I've never been someone who's desperately keen to be equanimous. Enlightened, yeah. It was never high on my list of whatever is going to be around. Wise, that'd be nice. Equanimous sounds a bit limp. But that's what happens. Not through desire, but through the process of just recognizing the stress of this and the limitations of that and the changeability of that and the fragility of that and the variability of that, and you could see it this way and that way, but it's going to change, and just seeing that and that and that, and just seeing what happens in your own direct experience as you tangle with things, as it tangles with this, as it tangles with that, as it wrangles with this, as it restricts that, as it tries to stop that, as it tries to want more of that, as it tries to no, and it doesn't work. I just go poof. It just, it's like you find the only way where things settle. Where the streams don't enter and spin around and round and round again, is that stillness, or that place, or that non-place. There's something to practice with. I say, like with these enlightenment factors, you can look at them. The first few are definitely things you do. You do mindfulness. You deliberately refer to experience. You do it. Okay, it's that. What's happening with that? Vitakka vichara. Place your attention on that. How is that? It's a referential experience. You keep doing that. You do it. That leads to exploration. What's the meaning? What's that about? What's that based upon? Because now you're holding experience, direct experience. And how is this? What's the mean? What's the essence of this? How does this happen? What's the quality of this? The energy arises. A sense of, because when you explore, this is the mental energy is aroused to do the exploring. It's not frantic, but it's a steady inquiry, energizing, the mind is energized. Important to recognize that process rather than expect to get quiet too quickly. Calm doesn't comes later. There's a certain calmness, in composure in one's quality of expiration. They're not frantic, but it's definitely gently active, calming, steadying, how's this, how's that. And so the citta is then energized in a positive way, casts off its sluggishness and its impatience and its diversive, wanting to go somewhere else. And result, the field is purified, the domain is purified, there's a sense of refreshment, piti, steadying it. And this is about as far as you can kind of go with the doingness, because at that point it becomes much more, this is what happens. As the steadied, easeful mind settles, samadhi collects, therefore it's equanimous. You can't really do equanimity, but it's a consequence of a process that you can do, you can engage with. So mostly as we practice, we're investigating phenomena, Dhamma Vijaya. So, not investigating the person, why I'm like this and why I'm like that, and when this happened and could be this, and investigating, this is the quality of agitation, this is the quality of restlessness, this is the quality of regret, this is the quality of anticipation. It's very phenomenological. That's the Dhamma Vijaya. It feels like this. So you're separating what can be a person, can form a person, into these universal citta qualities, because that's what they are. And one of these, of course, in the bodily sense, we take the body very personally. You look at it from the outside, it's not like anybody else, but internally, which is a direct experience of body, it's earth, fire, air and water. You don't really worry about your hairdo when it's like that, or what colour your shoes are. When you see it like that, it kind of cuts through a whole lot of tangle. So investigating things as dhammas is a way out of the tangle. Because everybody's got earth, air, fire and water. They're just that. And then you experience the body directly. Your citta can resonate with and explore rather than think about and compare and get emotionally reactive to. And this is, a lot of fire today. Getting pretty fired up. What's needed? What's needed? Water, something harmonious, chanting softly, resonance. Getting too rigid, what's needed now? A little bit of flex, fluidity, water, flow. Walk up and down. Chant. These are very simple resources that are not dealing with topic, they're dealing with the effects, which are what we are handling to come out of the tangle, the complexity, to the direct simplicity that leads out of the maze, out of the tangle. So it takes some time for direct practice.